In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this digital gouache bluebell painting on your iPad in the app Procreate. Hello and welcome to Color with Candy, where we paint digital gouache and digital watercolor on the iPad. For today's video, you'll need a few supplies, which I've listed in the description. I'm using an iPad. I'm using an Apple pencil that is pressure sensitive. That's generation 1 or generation 2. I'm using the Amazing Gouache brush pack and the canvas that comes with it, the 8x10" canvas. And also there's a free traceable for this video, so you can follow along even if you don't know how to draw. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the canvas just by swiping to the left. That way I'm not touching the original, and I'm going to tap on it. And then I'm going to open up the layers panel and just tap on the topmost group. And I will import the traceable. Just go to the Actions menu, tap on Add, and insert a file or photo. Depends on where you saved it. And that is done. I'm just going to tap again on the Layers panel and just zoom out a little bit. So the traceable and the color palette are both on the same layer. So this is our game plan for this particular painting. I always talk about the game plan first so you know what's going on. So we are going to start out by painting in the background. After painting in the background, we are going to paint in all of the green parts, the leaves as well as the stems. And then we'll paint in the bluebells, and then we'll do some details. And the last bit is the little bee. That is totally optional. If you don't want to paint in the bee, you don't have to. So to paint in the background, I'm going to do this in its own layer. I'm just going to do it here. I generally don't label my layers, but you can call this background if you want. Sometimes it's a good idea to name all of your layers. And for the background, we're going to select this color. So just press and hold, and that will select the color for you. And then we'll go in to the Amazing Gouache brush set. And I'm going to use a flat paint brush. So there's flat paint B here. Zoom out a little bit. And yeah, basically I'm just going to paint this entire background, this rectangular bit, with this brush. So with this brush, depending on how much pressure you apply, you will get different texture on the edges. If you apply heavy pressure, you're seeing less of a texture. If you apply light pressure, you'll see more of a texture. And if you're struggling to see the color because this is a lighter color, you can always change the color. The color is totally up to you. You don't have to use the same colors. So I'm just going to go around and actually maybe increase the brush size and just with loose strokes paint in the background. And while I paint in the background, I'm actually leaving a few white spots just to give it more of a painterly feel. Otherwise, it can start to look quite flat, and I don't want that. So I'm varying my pressure. At some points, I'm using light pressure, and then sometimes I'm using heavy pressure, just so it has a more organic feel. So now let's go to the next layer. I like to paint in layers. That way, if I ever want to change the color of something, I can. So now let's paint the green bits. So let's start out with this color here. And then I'm going to select one of the basic gouache brushes. Any brush of your choice, they all have slightly different textures. I think I'll go with this one because it has somewhat of a dry texture. I want this to have a textural feel. But if you want something that's a bit simpler, you can go with one of the other gouache brushes. So let me just show you this brush. So that's kind of what it looks like at a large size. Actually, I'm not even on the big brush. Yes, I am. It's a bit too big. So sometimes you need to change the brush size. Yeah, I think that's still a bit too big because we are doing stems. I think that might be too small. So I think it's always a good idea to test the brush. And I think for the purpose of filling in these kind of shapes, yeah, that's a good size. So that's size 23. So I always experiment with the size first and get a feel for it and then start painting. So what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to fill in all of these leaves here as well as the stem with the same color. You can use different colors if you'd like. And then I'm going to add some interesting colors on top of that as a clipping mask. So I'm just going to lightly use the brush. I'm going to lift the pencil many times just so it gives it a much more organic look. And I'm not trying to get a perfect edge. I want it to have that painterly feel. So I'm just going to go around and complete that. I'm going to avoid having too many gaps. So I will complete this and I'll meet you back. Okay, so now I just want to check my work. So I'm going to turn off that layer and have a look. So there are a few gaps here. I kind of like that. I didn't leave too many. I just feel like it makes it look a bit more painterly. But if you want to fill in those gaps, you most certainly can. But we will be adding more color on top of this. So we're not done with this yet, but we're done for the base color. So now let's move on to the bluebells and then we'll come back to the leaves in a bit. So let's go with another layer. Let's turn that back on again, our top layer. And let's use this color here for the bluebells. And yes, I'm in another layer. And you could use a different brush or the same one. I want to use a different brush for this. So I'm just going to use this brush here, just because I think it's nice to mix slightly different textures together in a painting. So this brush is a little bit different from the other one. It's just a bit softer. It's also pressure sensitive. I'm going to go with the smaller side. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fill in the base colors for all of the bluebells. So I'm just going to go in and paint. I still think this is a tad too big. So as I said, sometimes you have to change the brush size. Yes, I like this. So wherever you feel like you have good control, that's a good brush size. I do think that the traceable is a tad too dark for me. So I'm going to go into the layers panel and go to the traceable, tap on N and reduce the opacity just a bit. So I can kind of see my painting more. Right now I see too much of the traceable. You can always change that later on. So let's go back to the layer. And now let's just fill it in. I just want to show you the texture of the brush. So I'm going to turn that off. So as you can see, it's not a fully flat color. You have some transparency because gouache, while it is opaque depending on how much water you use, it can be slightly transparent. So what I'm noticing is that when I'm painting the bluebells, I'm kind of hiding this part here. So I'm going to take that bluebell layer and just move it underneath. Okay, so we have finished the base layers for the bluebell, but I want to add more texture. So there's two ways of doing this. One is just to paint over the bluebell the areas you want more texture and more color variety, or you can use a clipping mask, which is what I'm going to do. It just makes life a little bit easier because when you paint in a clipping mask, whatever I paint is only going to show up on the shape underneath. So I've already done the base shapes for the bluebells. I just want the texture to show up on that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the layers panel, tap on plus, that way I have a new layer, and then tap on it again and make it a clipping mask. So anything I do in this layer will only show up on the shapes underneath. And what I want to do is I want to add a slight shadow to one side, just to kind of indicate that we have light coming in from here. Let's say you can decide where you want your light to come in, and then I'm going to add a shadow on this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this color and go just a tad darker down at a diagonal. And then I'm going to go to maybe soft edge, one of the soft edge brushes, and add a touch of shadow to the tops and the sides, like that. It doesn't need to be the same, but as you can see, what I'm doing here is I'm adding some texture, but it's only showing up on the shape underneath, and it's not showing up outside of the shape. That way it's just a little bit easier. When you're painting traditionally, you don't have this option. This is definitely a more digital option, but I like to use it because it just makes things a little bit easy. So I've done that. You can add a little bit of lighter color on one side too, if you want to indicate. So I'm going to go back to this color and then maybe make a tad bit lighter to indicate that there is some light coming on this side. That is up to you. Well, I'm not going to do it for all of them, just for a few of them. Okay, so I'm happy with the texture. Now I want to start to add some of the details. I don't need the details to be in a clipping mask layer, so I'm just going to add the details in another layer. I like to work in layers because that way if I make a mistake or something I don't like, it's just easy to delete. I'm not touching the layers underneath. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to go to the thick detail B and I'm going to go and grab that color there. So you have to go back to our original traceable. I'm going to have to increase the opacity to see the actual color and then grab that color. And now I don't actually need the traceable, so I'm going to get rid of it for now. And I'm just going to call this detail. So this is the detail for the bluebells. So this is the brush. It's too small. As I said, always a good idea to check the brush size and decide, I think this is good. It's kind of got an interesting texture, and depending on how much pressure you apply, you'll get thin or thick lines. And what I'm going to do is just going to add some interesting outlines to each. I'm not going to completely outline, I'm going to leave some gaps just so that there is some definition. And then I'm going to add a few lines here and then paint the inside of the bluebells. So I'm going to do a similar process to the stems and the leaves. So I'm going to go back to where they were, add a clipping mask. That's where we're going to add the different color. And then we will do the details. So let's go back to our original traceable. And I'm going to select this color right here. I don't need this anymore. So I'm going to go to the clipping mask layer that we have just above the layer where we painted the stems and the leaves. And I'm going to go in with this basic wash C and just add a little bit of textural variety, some strokes of this color. And I want to smudge it out in a bit, but not just yet. So add that color wherever you want, and then I'm going to go to the smudge tool. I'm going to make sure I'm on the right brush set, and then you can use any of the smudgers that you'd like. I'm just going to gently smudge it just a bit, not too much. I don't want to completely remove the texture that I added, but I want it to look a little bit more like it's blending. And less separate looking. Okay, I'm happy with that. You can definitely add a little bit of other colors as well, something darker. Now it's time for us to do the detail. So I'm going to do this in another layer. It's not a clipping mask layer, it doesn't need to be. And I'm going to go back to that same brush that we used for the details, that thick detail B. And I'm going to grab this color right here and go down at a diagonal and just test it. I want there to be enough contrast to see it well. Yeah, I think that's a good amount of contrast. Whenever I do details, I like to have some contrast, otherwise it's kind of hard to see them. So what I'm going to do is, with varied pressure, just going to draw a line. So do you see, because I'm varying my pressure, I'm getting slightly different texture and the line width is varying. If I use the same amount of pressure throughout the stroke, it will look like that. It still looks nice, but it's not as organic looking, and that's kind of the look I'm going for here. And maybe I'll do a little bit of an outline. This is totally up to you. Don't have to do an outline, but for this painting I want to. There's different ways of doing everything, And it is totally up to you what you decide to do. If you want to add outlines, some people don't like to add outlines. For me, I make that decision based off of the painting. I think for this one, it would be nice to add an outline so it's kind of easier to see what every element is. And I'm not being perfect with these. I want this to have that painterly feel, more organic feel. I like that. So now the decision is up to you. If you want to add an outline to the rest, the stems. The leaves, I like the outline. I'm even going to add some. That's totally up to you. I don't know. I like to add little dots to everything. That's just me. So now, here as well, going to add an outline. Actually, you know what? Maybe I will add an outline to just one side. The side where we have more of the shadow, I will add a slight outline to that. Okay, I think that has a good amount of definition. I like that. Now it's time to add the bee. As I said, if you don't want the bee, you don't need to add the bee. It's just there to add a cute element. So let's do that in another layer in case we decide not to use the bee. And let's go back to our top image because I will need that. And the bee is really simple. So for the bee, all you really need is a dark color, blackish, not quite black. I'm going with a warm orange on the slider, on the color slider. Color wheel, it's not the slider, color wheel. And I'm not gonna go completely black. I feel like that's a bit harsh. Really dark brown. Although bees are more black, I guess. But we'll go with a dark brown. And then I'm just, with that thick paint bee, that's the brush, I'm just going to paint that in. Actually, I should have painted the body first. Okay, let's paint in the body. I'm gonna do all of this in one layer. I don't think I need to do this in different layers, but I'm not going to change it. And I will select a yellow-ish orange, or an orange-ish yellow. Let's see, is that a good color? Yeah, I think so. Maybe a little bit more on the yellow side. There we go. I didn't provide that in the color palette. I forgot. Okay, so just color that in. I'm going to leave a few gaps again to make it look a bit more painterly. And then I'm going to grab this color again. And then I'm just going to do quick lines, very swift lines here to indicate the fuzziness. And then I'll just make the legs. Should I add an eye? Maybe. Let's do that in white, but not quite pure white. And let's make this a bit smaller. Maybe make an eye. What do you think? Yeah, cute. Okay, and now the wings. So the wings you could do in gray or maybe like a bluish. I've seen people do it in like a bluish gray. Let's see, maybe we give that a shot. That's totally up to you how you want to do it. Yeah, maybe that's a good color. And if you want to add some detail to the wings, you can. And let's just turn this off and have a look. I think the wings need a little bit more contrast. So we can either repaint the wings, but that's extra work. And well, we're working digitally, so we don't need to redo that kind of work. So I'm just going to go to the selection tool and make sure you're on freehand and you don't have any of these on, just the add. And I'm just going to go around and select the wings. And I just want to darken them a little bit. So I'm going to go here, this adjustments panel, tap on hue, saturation, and brightness. And now I've selected just the wings and I'm going to make them a little less bright. So there's a little bit more contrast, so it's more visible. Just going to double tap and yeah. So there we go. We are done. I could definitely make that bee a bit bigger. Should we try that? Maybe. Let's see. I'm going to duplicate this just in case. I would just want the original size. And then I'm going to make this bigger. Generally, I avoid making things bigger after I've painted them because they do lose quality, but we're not going to make it that much bigger. Just a notch. And maybe shift it here and angle it. What do you think? I think it's a bit cuter now that it's bigger. So I will keep it there. and it has lost a little bit of its resolution. That definitely happens, but that's okay because I'm not planning to print this. But if you're planning to print this, then that loss of resolution is not a good idea. So I would just repaint this, or what you could do is go to the adjustments panel and go to sharpen and sharpen that. Oh, yeah, I think that looks decent. It's a little trick. It's not ideal, but yeah. Done. Let's zoom out. And if you want to readjust, you can definitely readjust. And if you want to get rid of the background and have a look at what it looks like without the background, let's have a look. It has a very different vibe. I have to say, totally different vibe without the background. And if I remove the B, totally different vibe. So that's why I like working on layers, because now once I've done the illustration, I have that option to kind of just change things up and see what do I like. Because for me, one of the most fun things about digital art is the ability to experiment and try new things. So the bee, I think, makes this painting cuter. And there's a lot of nice contrast here. And the background just, I think, softens things. There's also one more thing that you could do that I sometimes like to do when I have a painted background. So I'll go to that layer, I'm gonna tap on this and add a new layer. And what I'm going to do is I am going to add some white around our bluebells and our leaves, just so it pops a bit. And you can do this with any brush that you like. So let's see, or maybe I'll go in with the soft edge paint. And let's just see. Oops, that's not even the right color. Double tap at the 10 o'clock position to get pure white. And let's have a look. Maybe a tad smaller. And it just makes it pop a bit more, so that way you still have the background and it doesn't need to be a perfect outline. I like that. I am happy with that. Could I keep fiddling with it? Yes, but at some point you have to stop. I could definitely add a little bit more color variation here to the bluebells, but as I said, I want to keep this one simple. So this is a good starting point. You can definitely change up the colors because bluebells actually aren't always this shade. Sometimes they're a little bit more purple. So you can always go in and change the shade of the bluebells. There's a lot that you could do now that we have done this painting in layers. And yeah, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video and you had some fun. Let's just zoom in and check our work and have a look at the textures we created. So it has a nice painterly texture, but it's still a very simple painting, something that a beginner can do. It's really not that hard. And you can take these techniques and apply it to your own paintings, your own style. So I hope that this video was useful and you learned something new. And if you enjoyed it, please do give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next video. And if you are interested in the brush set, you can find the link in the description. And by the way, this brush set is going to be upgraded very soon. So if you purchase it today, you will get the upgrade for free. Okay, thank you very much. Bye.